So today I want to talk about the 10 nerdiest bands, artists, solo artists. The 10 nerdiest. They're in no particular order. They are. They're chronologically, as best as I can kind of put them chronologically. And certainly the albums that I happen to be showing aren't necessarily themselves in chronological order, although they're probably pretty close. But I was a child of the 80s, right? I came of age with MTV and looks mattered. And I mean, the early bands that I got into were like the hair bands, a lot of them. A little bit of new wave, well, really, let's be honest here. As far as buying records, it was the hair bands. It was Quiet Riot. It was Motley Crue. It was Rat. It was my first Columbia record shipment was full of records like that. Van Halen, Billy Squier, a bunch of that kind of stuff. And at that time, looks really mattered, right? It was MTV. It was an era of image, especially when you think about the hair bands, especially when you think of a band like Van Halen. I mean, at the time, when you're 12 years old, there's nothing cooler than David Lee Roth. So all these other more nerdy bands that you've kind of encountered, they've seemed very, very dorky and nerdy, and I think especially at that age, it was maybe a little harder to get into them. All these bands, I think I like every one of these bands that I'm showing, and I think it is kind of funny how we used to have movies called Revenge of the Nerds, and now I would say the nerds totally won, and everybody's kind of a nerd. So with that said, here are some artists that I think were definitely considered nerdy in their time, and hopefully we can just kind of have fun with this. I would love to hear your suggestions of who you think are kind of nerdy artists too. I was going to tape my glasses up. I find myself keep doing I'm doing this like I'm acting like they're taped or something. Anyway, let's start with number one. Number one, again, just chronologically, Rush. Concept albums that got really into science and mythology and multi-parts, prog at its best/worst. They're all three of the members like super technically proficient on their instruments and want to make sure you kind of knew it. And odes to Ayn Rand or whatever the fuck her name is. Good albums, I think. Good band, great band. Actually, I really learned to appreciate them with their documentary that came out a few years ago, Behind the Lighted Stage. Excellent. If you don't, not the biggest Rush fan, but you just want to watch a really good music documentary, boy, that's a good one. Really good one. In high school, I always kind of thought they were a little too nerdy, or I didn't like the idea of going to see a light show. You know, these are the ways. This is the way I pictured these bands at the time, right? Post Tom Sawyer, that was probably my introduction. Stuff like Power Windows. Just everything about it just kind of didn't do much for me. Of course, years later, I get into motion pictures, I get into signals, I get into, not even years later, I think I was still in high school, got into permanent waves. Recently, in the last 10 years, I finally listened to 2112, and I actually really liked it, and liked Hemispheres too. That might have been after I watched Behind the Lighted Stage, but Rush were definitely a little nerdy. They were nerdy, and you could argue that their fan base could be a little nerdy too. But really, no judgment. Being a nerd is not a bad thing. All right, what do I have next? Oh, I skipped one, and it was not in chronological order anyway. I wanted to kick this off with Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa? Have you ever talked to a rabid Zappa fan? Okay, all right. Well, we won't have to elaborate anymore there. But here's a guy who is constantly trying different musical directions. Created a niche all his own. I don't really claim that I know Zappa that well. I have certainly tried, and maybe someday it'll click for me. But I don't think there's any real denying that Zappa could be a bit of a nerd when it came to music. Again, nothing wrong with being a little nerdy. Next, this artist, this guy, I swear I remember it. There was an article on Talking Heads, and it said, David Byrne, rock's biggest nerd. And this was probably around the time of True Stories in '86. This album my favorite Talking Heads record, songs about buildings and food, or more songs about buildings and food. Well, that's kind of a nerdy title too. But you don't get much more nerdy than David Byrne around the time of Remain in Light. Once in a Lifetime video kind of says it all, but if that wasn't enough proof of him like slapping himself in the face and right in front of the camera and wearing those thick glasses. Well, by the time he wore the big suit, that was kind of nerdy too. And I love Talking Heads. They're a little nerdy. Let's see, what do we have next? We have a band that I do not actually have any records by, physical records. Used to have some CDs. The CDs went away. I need to, I can't be blowing all of my money on old records. But anyway, Devo. I mean, look at the bucket heads, the Whip It video, the de-evolution thing. It's funny to me that apparently at the time they came out, people thought they were like somewhat dangerous, this de-evolution thing. But I think that Devo definitely fit the bill of being a little nerdy, a little on the nerdy side. And of course, I love Devo, especially the first record, Are We Not Men? We Are Devo. But I think Devo do fit the bill again of being a little nerdy. Next, we have a artist who I think definitely fits the bill of being a little nerdy. There's a great quote by David Lee Roth. He liked to say the same things over and over in the 80s, but he said, the reason why critics love Elvis Costello is because they look like Elvis Costello. Yeah, looks like a guy that you worked with at some temp job. It kind of looks like, Buddy Holly, but Buddy Holly kind of looks like that too. He'd be in black and white, it'd be a little awkward. But Elvis Costello, he was a little nerdy. Love Elvis Costello. My favorite Elvis record is probably King of America or Imperial Bedroom. Those are probably my favorites. I'll stick with that for now. Next up, we've got one that I think is going to surprise some people, especially the metalheads. I don't know. I might hear about it in the comments, but I can defend it. I can defend it pretty well. And that is Iron Maiden. Yeah. Now look at Iron Maiden in the context of what was going on at the time. You have all these British metal. You have that, but British metal also consisted of Def Leppard. But you also have all these hair metal bands that were like super popular at the time. The Motley Crues, the Rats, the Poisons, the Britney Foxes, the Slaughter, and Danger. And in that mix, you had Iron Maiden. The kids, scary stoner kids when I was a kid, before their Power Slave and Metallica's And Justice for All, or definitely the Black Album, probably And Justice for All. The scary kids were the ones that had the jean jackets and they had the Iron Maiden pads, or the Metallica patches, rather. Metallica patches, like real prominent, or Iron Maiden. But why is Iron Maiden a dorky band, a nerdy band? Because they didn't give a shit about the way they looked, first of all. They wore the spandex. Okay, they probably did that. Maybe it was comfortable. I don't know. Bruce Dickinson was into fencing. Maybe that had something to do with it. They didn't put any makeup on their face. They didn't care about any of that stuff. But look at the subject matter. While everybody else is singing about getting laid or, going on vacation or fast cars or partying or whatever, Iron Maiden were singing about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner or Alexander the Great. All these legends and mythology and history. I used to joke around that I passed 10th grade history by memorizing lyrics to Iron Maiden songs, and there is a little bit of truth to that. They open up this live album with Winston Churchill's speech. It was the first time I ever heard Winston Churchill's speech. Yeah, so Iron Maiden, they could be a little nerdy, little dorky. But of course now there's like a war against intelligence. People that, I don't know, like, not cool to be super intelligent. But I would say that Iron Maiden were pretty intelligent. Definitely got their listeners to think about things a little bit differently if they weren't just banging their head on the side of the stage. What do we have next? We have another artist that I do not have any records from, and that is They Might Be Giants. The sun is a mass of incandescent gas, a giant nuclear inferno, blah, 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 blah. They told me that I didn't know what Istanbul was. I didn't know the city of Istanbul or a thing about it before They Might Be Giants. But you just have to look at They Might Be Giants and you listen to They Might Be Giants, and yeah, I don't think very few people would argue that they're not a little nerdy. A lot of fun live. I never really got into them as far as getting all their records or anything, but I always loved seeing them live, and whenever they play those well-known songs, it was just like the coolest thing. I haven't seen them in a number of years, but They Might Be Giants were definitely a little on the nerdy side. Now we're going to catch up a little bit. Feels like more modern times, although I think it was 30 years ago that this record came out. Weezer, the Blue record. Kind of nerdy in that time period. There weren't a lot of bands that had really short hair and sang about Buddy Holly and were as kind of the songs about the sweater song. I like Weezer, but I don't think you can deny that they are a little on the nerdy side, and I think they've only kind of gotten nerdier as they've gone on with different like genre exercises, some of the album covers they've had. A lot of fun live though. I saw them for the first time probably about 8 years ago, and it was a blast. So definitely am a Weezer fan, but yes, I do think Weezer are a little nerdy sometimes. The next one I kind of debated, like, should I include this or not? But they're one of these bands that's very intelligent. I think most nerdy bands are a little intelligent. And there's a reason why almost all of them on the list here are very, very good bands that are artists that we still listen to decades after their record came out. But this band was very literate, very, very well read. They kind of are sort of like the Smiths in that they really own the branding. All their records kind of look similar. Great iconic imagery, but very, very precious. Twee is a word that often gets used for this band. I'm talking about Belle and Sebastian. This is one of the earlier records called Tiger Milk. Yeah, I think you could call them pretty nerdy. Really great stuff, though. Really great. I've actually really liked their last couple of records, and then one of them got sick and they had to cancel, and they haven't been able to. It might be touring it now actually, but for a while there they couldn't tour the record, and they had 2 out in a row, and both of them were very good. But yeah, I don't think there's too many people that would deny that Belle and Sebastian can be a little on the nerdy side. Okay, it is time for, and these again were in like no order other than somewhat chronologically. It's time for the last one on this list, which is the Mountain Goats. This is an early record of theirs, but the Mountain Goats, again, super intelligent, very literate. You kind of got to get out the lyrics and read along as you're listening to the records. Very wordy and kind of nerdy. And kind of nerdy when you see them live too. But great bands. I can't keep up with them, to be honest. They put out so much material. Got into them with Tallahassee and the Sunset Tree. Those are probably the 2 that I go to the most. But yeah, so that's the 10th one on Rock's Nerdiest list, or the Nerdiest bands, or the Nerdiest artists, or whatever I decide to throw up on the title screen eventually. But there are 2 honorable mentions. I take that back. There's going to be 3 honorable mentions. So, number 1, She Blinded Me with Science, Thomas Dolby. You don't get much nerdier than that. The video, the song, he totally kind of owned being a nerd and singing about science. I don't know much about Thomas Dolby beyond that, but when I was putting together this list, Thomas Dolby went right in my head as somebody that definitely on the nerdy side. Honorable mention of an artist at a particular time and a very particular album is my next honorable mention. This is Neil Young with Trans. pretty nerdy. Playing around with a bunch of synthesizers, using a vocoder for his voice, disguising it in an attempt to communicate with his son who has severe cerebral palsy. Tensions were good. The record's actually kind of cool. It's not bad. And it works best when it is more of the vocoder and playing around with the synthesizers and technology than it is when there's just some straight up like almost acoustic-y numbers on here. They don't really fit. But tensions were really great, but it's definitely on the nerdy side, and that's what makes it great. Okay, the final one is, I do not have a picture of, but the final honorable mention, and his nerdiness is intentional, and it's a character he plays, and so I was like, do I put this on the official list? But Weird Al Yankovic, I mean, you can't get much nerdier than Weird Al. A brilliant guy. I mean, all the concept records or the songs built around concepts, making fun of parodies of other songs, just brilliant. This is a really good opportunity too to tell my Weird Al story. I am 19. I'm moving into where I was gonna go, or maybe I just turned 20. I think I just turned 20. I'm moving into the summer house I'm gonna live at in college over the summer, and I had called in like a couple days earlier to try to win tickets to see Weird Al, and I won, or I didn't win tickets. I won his latest record. I won his latest, and it was the Nirvana one. It Smells Like Nirvana. I don't know if that was the name of the record, but that was the tour, and that was the latest record. I'm driving around. I'm moving. My friends helped me move, and I'm hearing this drawing that's going on to win the grand prize, and the volume's really low in the car, and I'm like, whoa, turn this up. I'm actually like entered in this, and then they draw my name, so I won tickets to the show to see Weird Al Yankovic in the summer of '92. Smells Like Nirvana was a big song. I don't remember what the record was called, and I won his entire catalog, all of his records, tickets to the show, 2 people, and then I got to meet Weird Al. And the show was that night. So like I basically had to, finish the moving or whatever and then go see the show. And I met Weird Al. I was a college student. I was too broke to buy a t-shirt. I remember I had him sign a white t-shirt. He did sign it. And I remember saying like, I have all your records or something, or I pretended to like his music or know his music beyond the hits. And I think it kind of backfired on me a little bit. I think I can't remember what it was, but there was definitely a open up mouth, insert foot kind of moment. But he was a super cool guy. He was fun, and the show was great. I mean, he was a lot of fun to see. Like big stage production, changing clothes into his characters, whatever. But I saw Weird Al. I had all of his CDs up until like Polka Party, and I had Dare to Be Stupid in 3D when I was a kid. But I had all of them. I got all of them, and then eventually I sold them to a record store so I could buy other CDs. But anyway, that's my Weird Al story. So kind of topping this thing off with one of the biggest nerds of all time. But that's my nerds in music list. Hope you had fun with it. Hope I had fun with it, kind of thinking about it. Write down or join me in the discussion. Write down what your favorite nerdiest artists are too. And like I said, I think everybody's kind of a nerd now. So it's just the way the culture is. So there are no David Lee Roth or John Bon Jovi's. Like, he was never cool anyway. I'll shut up. All right. Thanks, everyone.